The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to go over some winning combinations for your pool. This will make your pool care a breeze out there on your pool route, and also if you're a homeowner taking care of your pool. And I'm going to give you the combinations that I've set up here on some pools on my route, as well as my own personal pool and my dad's pool. And I'll go over some of the benefits of setting your pool up in this configuration so that you don't have to worry about your pool having algae or having to shock your pool. Pool Service Pro, open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro. So if you're a sports fan and you follow maybe basketball, let's say, and I used to watch a lot of sports back in the day. I don't have a lot of time to watch sports now, but like in basketball, you can never really win a championship with just one star player. You needed two superstars to really win. And if you have three, you're pretty much guaranteed to win the championship. And the same thing in football. I remember the Dallas Cowboys back in the day had Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin, three superstars, and they won championships with those three players. And the winning combination or the winning formula for your pool care is very similar. Having just one device or one aspect is not enough to have a winning formula or a winning team. So take my pool, for example. I have a saltwater generator, which is a good component to have on your pool, and it's definitely going to make your pool care a lot easier. But by itself, the saltwater generator probably won't be enough. There needs to be other things added to it to make your pool algae-free and easier to maintain throughout the whole season. So the saltwater generator that I have currently on here, I've had 3 different ones, and I have the Trichlor right now on my pool, which is a really good saltwater system. I run it at 50% output, and I have a variable speed pump on the pool. I also have a Nature 2 installed, and I put that on just as an experiment to test it out. It's very similar to the Pool RX. It uses minerals to sanitize the water. And then I have borates to 50 parts per million in the pool, which also helps with, it's an algistat and it's also a pH buffer. So it'll kind of counter some of the side effects of the saltwater generator. The fact that I'm running my saltwater generator on 50% output already is countering some of the side effects, which is the higher pH, and also the fact that you might have some white blowback going into the pool. So I run my saltwater generator at 50% to counter some of that. So I had the borates at 50 parts per million. I have the Nature 2 on the pool, and I also have the cyanuric acid at 50 parts per million. You can go as high as 80 on the saltwater pool, but I keep mine at 50 parts per million just out of habit. I could probably raise it. It would probably help a little bit, but the saltwater generator is one thing that you can definitely add to your pool. And like I mentioned, with the winning teams in sports, you need to have more than one superstar, and the same goes for the winning combination for your pool. So for me, it's a saltwater generator with the borates at 50 parts per million. And then just to throw in one more player, I have the Nature 2, which is like the Pool RX, which definitely is overkill for my pool for sure. It's 14,000 gallons. So for me, this has been the winning combination. The borates keep the pH from rising rapidly in the pool. The saltwater generator, of course, makes the chlorine for the pool. And the Nature 2 is just an added insurance against any algae or bacteria that may get into the pool. Over on my father's pool, there's an Indio, which is really hot. I think this next week is going to be 120 the whole week, or 113, something like that, something crazy. Very comparable to the weather in Arizona. He has an 8,000 gallon PebbleTech pool. Right now he has the AquaRex, it's the device. They also sell the jacuzzi version of this to help keep the scale off the pool. He has a saltwater generator that I had put on for him. It's a rated for 40,000 gallons of water. So he's running his generator at about 25 or 30% of output. He also has borates to 50 parts per million, and he doesn't have a Pool RX or anything like that, which would be overkill for his pool. And his pool, of course, stays algae free, and the pH is pretty balanced in that pool with that setup. It's a small pool, and it's very effective. I don't think he's had algae in his pool now for a couple of years with that setup. Before he's using tablets, and it was causing the cyanuric acid to go out of control, causing him to have problems with algae growing in the pebble tech. And then he would drain his pool every year to lower down the cyanuric acid level. So now he won't have to do that with the saltwater generator. Now you can use tablets effectively in pools. I'm not saying you can't. You just have to be aware of the side effect, which is the fact that they're 50% cyanuric acid in weight. So you can use them, but you won't be able to use them as your primary sanitizer unless you plan on partially draining your pool every season or switching off of the Trichlor and going with Hypo tablets the next year and vice versa. That might be also a winning combination. I haven't tried that yet, but I think that would work really effectively. 1 year using Trichlor, the following season using Hypo, and then go back to the Trichlor the following season. In between that year, the cyanuric acid level should drop down to acceptable ranges at that point, and then you can maybe do that, but I haven't experimented with that combination. But what I do on my route, if I have pools that are on Trichlor tablets, I'll use the Trichlor tablets as a secondary sanitizer, and I'll use liquid chlorine or Hypo as the primary sanitizer, which means that every week I visit that pool, I'm either putting in a pound of Hypo or a gallon of liquid chlorine, and then 1 or 2 tablets at the most to keep that cyanuric acid level from going up too high. And the pools that have Trichlor tablets, I will also use a Pool RX in there to help with that so that I don't need to add a lot of chlorine. It keeps the chlorine usage a lot lower by eliminating all algae in the pool. And so for me, that's a winning combination. Trichlor tablets as your secondary sanitizer, adding liquid chlorine or Hypo every week as the primary sanitizer. The Trichlor will keep a residual chlorine during the week, and when you get there, you're going to raise the chlorine level up with the Hypo or liquid chlorine. And then with the Pool RX unit in there, you're not going to need to use as much chlorine in that pool. Now, can you effectively just use Trichlor tablets in the pool and keep the pool sanitized with that? You can. You're just going to be adding a lot more Trichlor every month. So you may start off using 2 tablets in May, in June, 3 tablets in July, and by the end of August, maybe 4 tablets to keep that chlorine level high enough in that pool. And then you would need to partially drain that pool every season to lower down the cyanuric acid. I feel like that's not a winning strategy in anyone's book, but I think a lot of people do maintain their pool that way, and then they don't drain the pool at the end of the season, unfortunately. They let it go to the following season, and then you have all kinds of problem with needing to have a very high free chlorine level in that pool to be effective. I'll just quickly go over Bob Lowry's formula. 7.5% of your cyanuric acid should be the free chlorine in the pool. So if your cyanuric acid level is 100 parts per million, you need to have 7.5 parts per million of free chlorine in there. If you're at 200 parts per million, which would happen if you use tablets the whole season, and then the following season without draining the pool, you need to have your free chlorine at 14 parts per million. And as a quick reference point, LA County allows you to have your commercial, which is apartment complexes, HOA community pools, hotels at 10 parts per million, and not anything above that. And so if you had your cyanuric acid at 200 parts per million, you would need to keep that free chlorine at 14 parts per million, which is above the recommended level by the health department. And of course, if you have borates to 50 parts per million, that would be a 5% number. So if your cyanuric acid was 100 and your borate level was at 50 parts per million in the pool, then you would just need 5 parts per million of free chlorine in that scenario. Bottom line, you can do it, but it makes it very complicated to maintain a pool, which is Trichlor. It's not a winning formula. It's like having a 7'6" center on your basketball team and then having no other players on there. You're going to win a lot of games, probably, but you're not going to win the championship with that formula. And I think in the long run, you just need to change your game plan and your team and switch over to a team that's going to win it for you every season, because you're going to be battling algae in a pool and this with the Trichlor only method. And you may think that it's like algae resistant, a chlorine resistant algae, which I've heard people say, hey, there's chlorine in the pool and there's algae, so it's chlorine resistant. There's just not enough free chlorine in that pool to kill the algae at that point. So if your cyanuric acid was 100 parts per million and your free chlorine was at 3, you would think that would be enough, but it's not. It needs to be at 7.5. and that's why you have algae growing in a pool with trichlor tablets only. Another winning combination that I think is highly effective, and it's just unfortunate that Cal-Hypo tablets are hard to locate, but Cal-Hypo tablets in the skimmer or in a chlorinator designed for them, and liquid chlorine as your secondary sanitizer is a really good combination in most areas. Now the tablets are going to add some calcium to the water, but if you're using liquid chlorine as your secondary sanitizer, that'll kind of counter the calcium that's being added by the tablets. I don't think you would want to use Cal-Hypo tablets and then Cal-Hypo shock, because then you're adding a lot more calcium to the pool. And before Segura was sold to Solenis, they did recommend liquid chlorine as your secondary sanitizer, but since Solenis owns HTH and they make Cal-Hypo shock, I see on their site they're recommending Cal-Hypo tablets, which they acquired from the Segura deal, the Pool Life tablets or the CCH, and they're actually recommending Cal-Hypo shock, which is probably their HTH brand rebranded as Pool Life, which I don't think is a winning combination, but that's what they're recommending, because I think that's going to add way too much calcium to the water. Now, liquid chlorine, you may say, well, that adds salt to the water. And yes, it does add salt to the water, and I think that's a byproduct I can live with. And if you get a lot of rain in your area, that'll definitely dilute it. Or you can do a partial drain of a foot or two of water to get rid of some of the sodium from the liquid chlorine if you use that as your primary sanitizer. It's not as big as a deal of adding cyanuric acid from the trichlor tablets, and I don't think the Cal-Hypo tablets are something that you need to be concerned about if you're using the secondary sanitizer being liquid chlorine and not another Cal-Hypo type product. So I have some pools on my route on Cal-Hypo tablets with liquid chlorine as a secondary sanitizer, and then I have the borates to 50 parts per million in those pools. Or if they don't have borates in there, I have a Pool RX in there. So you see the combinations I'm coming up with is more than one particular aspect, and combining them together definitely makes a winning combination. I definitely wouldn't recommend a combination of Cal-Hypo tablets in the skimmer and then trichlor tablets in the floater, because one reason why you go into Cal-Hypo is you're getting away from the cyanuric acid being added to the water, plus they're both slow dissolving, and this is a problem with the trichlor tablets that, and the way the Cal-Hypo tablets also is that they dissolve slowly in the pool. So if you have 0 chlorine in the pool and you put 4 tablets in the floater, let's say because you're doubling up and you're thinking it's going to make a difference, it won't, because the trichlor tablets and the Cal-Hypo tablets are slow releasing and they don't release the chlorine all at once, and therefore you need to add another chlorine, which I consider a secondary sanitizer, to bring the chlorine level back up in that pool. So trichlor and Cal-Hypo is not a winning combination. I would think it would be like having 2 7-foot centers on your team and really no other players, and they can't really be on the court at the same time. It's probably better to have maybe, of course, a all-star guard and all-star center together versus 2 all-star centers. Lakers tried that. It was fairly successful, but again, it's not the formula that would win in most cases. And I think definitely having Cal-Hypo tablets with liquid chlorine and a borate level of 50 parts per million is a winning combination. You can also use a combination of a saltwater generator, UV and ozone, and then one element that I think is probably not promoted very well by the manufacturers because they want you to run the chlorine level at 1 part per million. I would suggest that if you do have a saltwater generator, a UV system, or an ozone system, or an AOP system attached to your pool, that you would keep your free chlorine at 3 parts per million. It's not going to cause any harm. When you have your free chlorine at 3 parts per million, it's not all active at the same time. And so having it at 1 part per million and 3 parts per million, you're really not going to notice a difference, but it's going to be much more effective at 3 parts per million in my book than at 1 part per million, even with the UV and the ozone working in the pool. So as a winning combination, I would have the saltwater generator producing the chlorine, have the cyanuric acid between 50 and 80 parts per million, and then have the free chlorine at 3 parts per million, have the UV and ozone working in conjunction with the saltwater system. And to me, that's a much better combination than having it at 1 part per million. It's not going to be nearly as effective, and you may have problems with water quality and water clarity. And I wouldn't overly rely on the ozone and UV. If there's any kind of problem with it, or there's something wrong, or the bulb is burned out, then it's not going to be effective in killing the viruses and bacteria. And the same with the ozone system. If it's not working and set up correctly, it's not going to be adding the extra oxygen to the water. So as a safety mechanism or as a safe bet, you want to have your chlorine level at 3 parts per million. If you're going to go with that low chlorine, no chlorine type combination, I definitely think 1 part per million in any scenario is not effective. Another good combination is using trichlor tablets with liquid chlorine as your primary sanitizer, and then using the phosphate remover and enzymes in pools. I found this to be highly effective. The phosphate remover and enzymes will definitely enhance the chlorine because the phosphate remover is eliminating one food source for the algae, which is the phosphates, and then the enzymes are breaking down some stuff in the pool that would use up the chlorine in the water. This is highly effective in pools where you have dogs swimming in them. So whenever I have an account that the dogs swim in, I'll use the combination of the phosphate remover and enzymes. Enzymes really help with the scum line, especially with the dogs in the pool. Then I'll have the pool either on a saltwater generator or trichlor and the liquid chlorine. Or you can even add a Pool RX to this mix. If you're having trouble maintaining the pool still with this formula, you can actually put a Pool RX in the pump basket, and I can guarantee you're not going to have a problem with any water quality issues, even with 2 or 3 big dogs swimming in it every week. And if you wanted to go for the moon on this one, you could have a team of all-stars by adding borates to 50 parts per million, because the dogs really make a mess of the pool, and it makes it really hard to maintain it. And of course, the customer is paying for the phosphate and enzymes, they're paying for the Pool RX, and they're paying for the borates. If they want to have their dog swimming in the pool, you're going to have this insurance as kind of a backup. And this goes also with the Airbnb accounts you have. You definitely want to put as many of these all-star products in the pool. You want to be adding phosphate and enzymes when you're there. You want to have a Pool RX in the pump basket. You want to have the borate level at 50 parts per million. You want to have a saltwater generator set at 100% output. You might even want to put a couple of Hypo tablets in the skimmer. Or if there's a offline chlorinator, put a couple trichlor tablets in there, because the Airbnb pools are going to be killed and they're going to be used by a lot of different people. People don't necessarily rinse before they get in the pool. Some people go in the pool with their clothes on. It's just a real mess. And then they're drinking and they're having all kinds of things going into the pool. So if you really wanted to build an all-star team for the Airbnb, I would definitely have a variable speed pump running 24 hours a day, not turning off at all, on a good medium to high speed. Then I would have the saltwater generator, the Pool RX, the borates at 50 parts per million. I would use phosphate and enzymes every week while I'm there. If you need to add Hypo tablets or trichlor, and then I would have the saltwater generator, of course, at 100% output. And the chlorine level should be maintained at a very high level, between 5 and 10 parts per million in an Airbnb type pool, because it's basically a commercial pool in a residential setting. And I guarantee if you do all of this, run the pool 24 hours and do all the other things I said to do, that this Airbnb pool will look pretty good every week. I had a customer where they went out of town for about a month and they had relatives from all over come to their pool. And I personally don't do any Airbnb services, but this was very similar to that. And I had to use this formula there while they were there. The first week the pool turned pretty ugly. I had to clean the defilter. Once I figured out what was going on here and that this was like a party house for the next month, I put this formula in action. And by the second week after I cleared up the pool the first week, this pool gave me no problems. And they were just killing this pool. I mean, you would have pool toys everywhere. And you would have the water level would be low because it would splash out so much water, and this pool was just being killed by them. But with this formula in there, it was not a problem for me, and it's something that you can implement. So the bottom line is, if you want to have a winning formula, it's not going to be just one element in the pool. If you just have a UV system and you're using trichlor tablets, that's not going to be enough to win the game. If you have trichlor tablets and you're not using anything else besides that, then you're going to definitely lose that game. You have no all-stars on your team at that point. But if you wanted to use trichlor tablets on your pool route and then use liquid chlorine as your primary sanitizer and then put a Pool RX in the pump basket or bring the borate levels at 50 parts per million, I think you would have a winning combination there for sure. And a lot of problems can be eliminated with a combination of different products that are all compatible with each other. The Pool RX is compatible with a saltwater generator, It's compatible with phosphate and enzymes. And I think in tandem, they work really well together. If you have a pool that you've had a lot of algae problems with, of course, investigate the filtration and the pump runtime. But if it's just a water quality issue as far as chemistry wise, then go ahead and use a Pool RX, get a phosphate remover, lower down the phosphates, use an enzyme in that pool, bring the borates to 50 parts per million, whatever you need to do to make your pool have that winning combination. And I'm a big fan of saltwater generators, and I just had a Chlorine Genie installed on one of my accounts, which is similar to a saltwater generator. So this particular pool now has the Chlorine Genie, and it has borates at 50 parts per million. So I'm going to try this combination to see if it's definitely a winner. It'd be just like having a saltwater generator and borates in the pool at 50 parts per million, which is not a bad combination. And if I do need to add something else, I will. But I think with the Chlorine Genie working and generating the chlorine in the device itself and injecting it into the pool like liquid chlorine, like a liquid chlorinator, and then with the borates at 50 parts per million, I think this is a winning combination. So I think the whole point here is that one particular product is not going to win it for you during the season, especially if you have a large pool, if you're in Texas or Florida, those areas where you get really severe weather. Southern California is mainly just the heat and the high UV index here that's the problem. And I think with the combination of any of these that I mentioned here, you're going to have a pretty carefree pool care experience with these particular products. And if you don't like Pool RX, that's fine. Just go ahead and use the borates to 50 parts per million. If you don't like borates, go ahead and use the Pool RX with enzymes and phosphates. You can choose what you want to use in your pool, and it's your own personal preference of what product you want to put in there. But I think the combination of different products definitely makes a difference. Just like an NBA team, when you have more than one all-star, you got a better chance of winning a championship. With 2, if you have 3, you're definitely going to win. If you have 4, you just give you the trophy before the season starts, basically. And it's the same concept here. If you're looking for other podcasts that I recorded, you can find them on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. If you go to the banner, click on the podcast icon, and there'll be a drop-down menu. I have podcasts on borates, on the Pool RX, on phosphate and enzymes. You can just type those in the search box and find those topics and listen to those. And if you want to enhance your business, you can also join my coaching program at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week. God bless. Pool Service Pro. Open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro.